No, not everybody. All right, we're going to go ahead and get ready to call public safety meeting to order, please. There we go. All right. So we're going to call public safety meeting to order. All committee members are present. Last time we met was January 7th. Can I get approval of those minutes, please?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Anybody opposed? All right. With that, we do not have no new legislation, but we have a presentation today from our human resource manager from the administration, Don Rice, and I'll turn it over to you.
Councilman, did I get a demotion? I'm the Director of Human Resources. I thought you just demoted.
Director, I apologize. Nope, I apologize.
And I have the Director of Public Safety and the Fire Chief. And I do have an announcement just to kind of keep the committee up to speed on, what we're doing in HR as it relates to public safety. The City of Akron is about to begin the recruitment process for the 2019 police class. And with that class, we are going to make some policy changes that we thought the committee would like to hear. First of all, we are raising the maximum age for police recruits to 40 years of age. Okay. The second thing that we're doing is we are reestablishing the police academy for the Akron-run police academy.
So if I clap, that wouldn't be disruptive, would it?
No, it would not. Okay. But wait to the third thing, because I think that's the best thing. The third thing is, once in the academy, cadets will be paid the step one salary of $26.22 for their work in the academy. We thought that there was a major detriment in that people had to give up their jobs to be members of the police academy, and with this wage of $26.22, we think we'll be able to, in all of these steps, we believe that we'll be able to increase the depth of our requirements, of our recruits, and the depth in an effort to get older recruits, other recruits, and to increase the diversity of the police department. So, and we'll also have a fire class later in the year. And for that fire class, we are increasing the maximum age to 35 years old, okay? And again, as I said, we are making these changes to expand our pool of eligible candidates and hopefully to increase the diversity of the people that we bring into the city of Akron. So that's my announcement. If you guys have any questions, I'm sure there's somebody around here, Chief Ball just joined us, that can answer those questions.
All right, thank you, Don. Let's go back to the fire class, starting with the new I'll call it academy or fire class. It's going to be 35 years. What is it currently?
I believe it's 32 years?
32?
31. Is it 31 or 32?
Yeah, it would be 31 the day that, go ahead, sir. Thank you. The first day, well, when you sit down and you take the test, you have to be 31.
Okay. All right, thank you. And then back to the police one. We're going to raise it to 40 years of age, but what is it currently?
35? 35.
35. Okay, and then one other question before I turn it over to the committee, because somebody spoke earlier and I couldn't hear. 40 years of age, and then what was the second? Second step or the second?
First step.
First step.
So when they enter the academy, they'll be paid
Okay.
first step as a police officer.
Okay, cool. Thank you. All right, with that, any questions, committee members? Do you? Councilwoman Sims, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I don't really have questions. I just have this feeling of real excitement. I think certainly the age difference for both police and fire will make a difference in terms of how we are able to recruit, and definitely to be able to pay folks while they're in the academy will go a long way, I think, with recruiting more minorities, African Americans in particular, so that we have a force that is representative, more representative of our community. So I'm grateful that we've heard the discussion that we've all been having for quite some time, and that we're finally here. So thank you, and thank you.
Well, thank you very much, and I'd like to ask each and every one of the members of the committee and everyone within the sound of our voice to help us find good candidates for the police academies and the fire academy.
All right, thank you, Councilwoman. We'll go to Councilwoman Keith, and then we'll come down. I see a couple hands.
First of all, I think this is a step in the right direction, especially when we want to expand diversity, so I thank you for that. And also, I want to know, what is the cost in the police academy? I know that we have a place. To start it back up again, what is involved? Chief Ball.
I was going to say, I assume that's directed at me. So we have looked at those costs, and obviously the largest one of them is going to be the police salaries. Currently, we pay about $4,000 for them to a training academy outside of the city of Akron. They're not receiving salary while they're there, which is typically for 24 weeks or a full tuition, a full semester at a university that hosts them in the OPATA Academy. So the salaries are the biggest part of that. Secondly, then we have costs for munitions, for training for firearms, and we have costs for, we already have full-time training staff, full-time training officers on staff, but we have additional officers that will go in to teach the totality of the classes that are involved in OPATA certification. There are costs for vehicles that are associated when we're running our own vehicles, our own fuel for driving standards. So those are about it, but we've also looked at ways that we can offset that by potentially bringing in our own candidates or students that are from outside of Akron. It's something that we had done in the past, where we'll have local municipalities who would prefer to pay for their student to go through OPATA certification through Akron, and we'll try to monetize that to offset some of the costs that exist for us.
Well, Chief Ball, I'm certainly for this. I think it makes sense, and I think especially when our officers are training our officers, there's more of a relevance there, that a better understanding, I think, of not how we do things, but of understanding our climate here and who we're dealing with. I think it's very, very appropriate. I also believe that by doing this, they're closer to home, and that if they do happen to have responsibilities outside of their training, that they have an opportunity to do this. And I think that we're going to get a better quality, because we can definitely say that we're starting a class here. We're not waiting on anybody. And I have heard concerns that when we do job fairs, we might have people that are interested in becoming a policeman, but because of the weight and everything, they get taken by somebody else because we can't accommodate them as quickly as we would like to. So I love the fact that we're going to expand our diversity, get a good quality, and get them in there much faster than we are. So, and I like the fact that we're also looking at other municipalities to help us shore up some of the expenses if they choose to come with us for their training. So thank you for looking at all angles on that.
And I'll add to that, we have been polling our graduates for several years now, finding out what's the impact of the training that we do, what's the quality of education that they get outside of the training academy. We had 94% of the candidates said yes, that they thought that more candidates would have considered working for the Akron Police Department if we offered our own academy. So we've been working on this for several years. The next one of the things that we polled, did attending the outside academy pose a financial hardship on you or your family? 82% of our hires said that it created somewhat of a financial burden for them while they were going through. So we knew that we needed to change that, and recruiting for all of safety forces, and especially police, is difficult in 2018. And part of that is finding out what's the way that we can be most attractive. So we looked at every single impediment that exists in our hiring process to try to get better, and these were ones that were available to us right now. And it's a stretch, but we're going to make some of those sacrifices to make sure that we're doing what we know can be impactful right now.
Thank you. Thank you for everything.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Thank you, Chief. Councilwoman Swirsky.
Just quick comment. Appreciate all the research and the fact that this is a carefully planned but bold step. Good work.
Thank you. Any other questions? I'm going down the row here. Then I see Mr. Neal, Russ Neal. Go ahead, and then I'll get over to Kilby.
Thank you. I just want to echo what some of my colleagues said. I want to say thank you to everyone that heard the concerns. of folks that were going through the academy and even had to drop out because they couldn't pay their bills, they couldn't sustain. So this is good to hear. Thanks for what you put in place, and I know it's going to make a difference on who we recruit.
All right, thank you, Councilman. Councilman Kilby?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, I was around this horseshoe when we lowered the age for police, I don't know, 10 years ago, does anybody remember? And the reason the prior administration, you know, asked for that and we ratified it was, well, this is what they said. Too many of the police officers that were older were prone to injuries naturally, and it was costing the city too much money for medical care, probably insurance rates, and also taking early retirement. I don't know how that affects the city, but maybe because of the health benefits. But so how do we, I mean, I think it's a good idea overall, because I personally think older people at least can maybe have a little better judgment than some of the younger people. Haven't got there yet. But so how do we, I mean, it's a balancing act, I understand that, but what about the costs of this in the future? Does anybody know what that's going to cost us? Has anybody looked at that? Because, you know, I know it's a good thing to do, but what's the cost-benefits factor? Has anybody looked into that?
Councilman, to the committee, that was one of the things we looked at and was something that we debated with regard to the potential for having older applicants, but we feel that, you know, that it's a different time than it was 10 years ago.
Yeah.
People are in better shape, okay? And quite frankly, they still, anybody who does this, no matter what their age is, still has to go through the academy and pass the physical test.
Right.
So we're very confident that if we recruit right and get the right candidates,
Yeah.
that they should be able to pass the academy and become very
Well,
productive
that sounds
people
like
in
you
that.
guys have thought about this, and that's good. I know they have to pass a physical, but the city's not going to lower the standards in any way. Oh, good.
Absolutely
and
not.
Another thing, once somebody's in shape, when they're 40, they may they can go downhill real quick if they quit eating right and exercising right. So maybe we should encourage some kind of exercise program and whatever to keep them healthy. And then I guess my other question is, it's not really a question, it's more of a statement. I've been around here a long time, and we've always had a goal of having more minorities, especially on the police department. I think that's a worthy goal. We have never been able to get there. We have a consent decree. Is that still in effect? We have a consent decree? No? Well, we should in some way, but has anybody ever thought of recruiting recently discharged military people nationwide that say, hey, you want to come to Akron? This is what we pay. You know, this would be equivalent to like $100,000 in California or New York City. If you want to come to a nice community, maybe, is there any way of advertising and trying to broaden our nets so we can attract the kind of people we want to recruit?
The Councilman, to the committee, I think that's I think you summarized the whole point of why we're doing what we're doing. We want to cast a broader net. And
Okay,
we
but
will,
you're just doing it in this community. I'm talking about nationwide.
Mr. Cooper, I can tell you from years back, we've partnered with the military. The program is called PAYS. So it's individuals who are PCSing out, which are moving out of the military. They have an opportunity to get information from us about the hiring opportunities, both with all public safety and others within the entire enterprise of the city.
So let me ask you this, Mr. Brown. What if we got somebody that was a MP and had a very good military record? Would he have to go to the police academy to be hired, or could we just put him on? I mean, maybe the
Yes.
chief would answer that. Would you want somebody like that? Would it be okay if you checked them out? And
We have been very purposeful with that. As a matter of fact, just probably less than 5 years ago, we had a federal grant that gave us funds to hire military veterans.
Good.
So each time we recruit, we are purposeful in approaching that particular group. And the training that is specific to the city of Akron, to the Summit County and the state laws, our policies and procedures, our rules and regulations are all unique. So somebody couldn't come in from the outside and have the experience or the qualifications to meet the standards that we would have internally.
Sure, I understand. The people I'm talking about recruiting are not just ex-military. it would be more geared towards ex-military police, MPs. I don't know what the shore patrol for the Navy or whatever. I was never in the military, but anyways, those are the people I would like you guys to try to target. And but maybe an impediment to that would have, I know we have a residence requirement, but I think the racial element should trump that to a certain extent, because we're having a problem ever meeting it. I know we've been doing this for 40 years that I know of, and never got to that point. I think it's a very worthy goal that people in our city know that we have cops that look like them. It's important, but the last question, I'll be brief. Can we hire, I know the suburbs have part-time police officers, and we had that discussion, and we didn't want to do it. And, but can we hire somebody, I know the suburbs hire people that went through some kind of a police, they paid for it themselves, and they're, what is it, certified Ohio Peace Officer? What's the license you need to, what is it? Ohio Peace Officer Certificate or something like that? Does anyone know? Anyways, can we hire somebody like that and just put them on as a police officer? Or do they still have to go through our academy?
Yes, we would like, as the chief said, we'd like every person who comes in to go through the City of Akron Police Academy, because we teach things that are Akron-centric.
Good.
As far as the laws and procedures and the attitude that we would like for our officers.
They have to learn the city, I understand that, but thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Kilby. Councilwoman Omobian, I know you had your hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a couple of questions, and I certainly endorse all of the things that you've talked about, because those are the things we heard as we were going around trying to recruit individuals during the time you were having the search. Would some of these opportunities that have been identified be covered under the issue $4? I'm speaking to you, Chief Ball.
We have set funds aside for 2019 that will help to supplement the budget that we will have for hosting our own academy. That was a part of our plan, going well back. We knew that it was going to happen in 2019, so we have set aside some of those funds.
From issue 4?
From issue 4.
Okay. The other question I have, are we pretty much in concert with other major cities with age limitation? Because some people, don't they have no age restrictions or something? Or I mean, you just can't have 65 and 90-year-old folks running, I know, for a police officer. But sometimes I've heard that people don't have the restriction as low as we do, because some people are in pretty good shape and can pass the physical tests.
Yes, we did research on those same things. We checked a number of communities, and what we found is the ages that we're bringing to you today are in keeping with most police departments. You are right. There are some that don't have any age requirement, but we thought that this would be the most appropriate for Akron.
I certainly agree. At least we are going that direction, and we may get somewhere close to that eventually. The academy that you're talking about, is there a new facility somewhere? Where would they be doing their training at, the physical setting?
That'll be done in the current facility we have where Akron Police Training Academy is.
And that is that the one by the airport, or is that another one?
That is up in North Akron.
Okay, there's on Dan Street. Here's one thing that I've heard, and I don't know how true it is, and I talked to you or somebody, and maybe not you. There were plans at some point of something moving into Goodyear Heights, and the residents that expressed concern to me about the shooting, the shooting drill or whatever being in the neighborhood, they were concerned about that. Is that still part of the plan of having something in Goodyear Heights?
This is not about facilities at all. This is just about us hosting our own academy. So we don't have immediate plans for our facilities to change. It's something that we had done some preliminary research on, and we're hopeful that at some point in time we may be able to change and have a joint training facility for police and fire safety forces in Akron. But it doesn't look like that is going to materialize anytime in the near future.
So where do they go for training on actual shooting? I know I went to the airport several years ago.
Yes, we do. We still do use Summit County Sheriff's outdoor range for some of our qualifications in firearms training, and we use the University of Akron for indoor training at their range. And then specialized firearms training we do outside of the city of Akron at other facilities like long guns and sniper training we do in different parts outside of Summit County.
Okay, okay. Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate the things that you brought forth.
Thank you, Councilwoman. All right, with that, any other questions or comments? Councilwoman Sims. Oh,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know we talked about different methodologies potentially going outside, but my hope is that we're looking for treasures and mining at home first, that be our priority, particularly in light of some of the changes in the criteria. You know, I know we can talk a lot about cost, and I know we probably did a lot of analysis around that, but I would endeavor to say it's really hard to calculate the cost of not having officers that reflect the community. There are so many variables here that have impacts on community and the overall wellness of the community. So again, I appreciate the change. I appreciate the intentionality, and really, it took a lot of heart to hear and to respond in this way. So thank you again.
Well, we thank you. And just a couple things. I did not mention when the police recruitment is going to begin. It's going to begin as soon as possible. We're looking at having a test sometime in mid to late April. Okay? And just to remind you, the minimum age for police is 21 and the minimum age for fire is 18.
all right, thank you. No more questions. Before we adjourn, I just want to, for the record, Chief Ball, Chief Tucker, what are the numbers we're at right now in regards to staff? If you don't mind.
We're just under 440 currently.
440, okay. Chief Tucker?
And we're at about 353.
353. Okay. All right, nothing else? We're good? Thank you for the presentation. I really appreciate it. Hey.
You know, only one person ever came to this. And I told him that my wife said if she saw him up on our porch again, she was going to call the police. First he tried to, he wrote a nasty note. He was up at the market. Somebody says, "You ready, mister?" Okay. Then he calls me. "You're coming?" I said, "You guys left the money." He goes, "No." Next day, he calls me. "Yeah, I just want to let you know." Okay, yeah. Yeah, it was kind of, because it was kind of creepy. Yeah.
I'd like to call the Park and Recreation meeting to order, please. Ms. Mosley Samples? Ms. Mosley Samples? We have, of course, we were without our system, so we have 2 weeks of minutes that are basically preceded this conversation. So if I could get a motion, please, to approve the minutes from the last 2 Park and Rec meetings. The motion is second. All in favor? Aye. Okay, today we have 2 guests. As you know, we've been analyzing, I'm going to ask them to come forward, Mr. Moore and Mr. Hafford. If you come, just have a seat in front of us, please. We've been taking time just to using Park and Rec as an example of how to analyze our policies. You can both sit in those seats right there, please. Cross. And yeah. And if someone could show them how to flip on the mic, please. We've been taking a look at using Park and Rec as an example of looking at our policies and see if they achieve the goal that we have in place, and more importantly, how equitable are they throughout the city. Of course, we've been focusing on using the neighborhood park and recreation, the neighborhood concerts as one example. Today, I just want to bring in 2 persons who work with the rec department. Both they're involved in coaching basketball. You know, as the city has moved forward, we've tried to find out ways that we can tighten our belt and raise fees. One of the things we did was change our fees for youth participation in basketball. So I'm going to just ask Mr. Moore and Mr. Hafford just to share some insight on how this policy has impacted, you know, our different youth that play basketball. So whoever wants to start first, just introduce yourself for the record, please.
Okay. Good afternoon, Council. My name is Terry Moore. I've been a member of the community since I was born and raised here. Not going to say how long ago, but it was a few years ago. I'd like to thank Councilman Neal for inviting me to come down. I ran into him a few weeks ago when we were talking about the sports program as it relates to Akron. So this is probably going to be something like the 30-second elevator speech that we tell our senior high school students to give if they run into prospective employers. So it's going to take me a little bit more than 30 seconds, but I'm just going to try to put it in a nutshell as to what this program means to Akron. First of all, I have a mission statement here of the ARB, and it says to improve the quality of life for all residents of Akron through safe, affordable, recreational opportunities and well-maintained facilities. So first of all, the affordable part is the part that I want to focus on. And I'm going to be brief, but I'm going to hit on 3 topics. The objective of what we try to accomplish at the youth basketball level, the benefit, and the importance of retaining the program. We all know that it takes a village to raise a child, and so it's a shared responsibility. My involvement as far as the mentoring is the coaching, so that's the involvement from the community. At the district level or at the administrative level, that's where council comes in. You guys are responsible for making sure that the program is going to go off every single year without a hitch, and that the facilities are provided for the kids so they can participate. So in short, I'm just going to give you guys a nutshell as to what my day-to-day practice would be like. So I get the kids for 2 days a week, Monday or Wednesday, for an hour. The first 15 minutes, I have a session, it's called Open Floor. And Open Floor deals with me listening to the kids to find out what's on their minds. So we can't effectively help them if we don't know what they're thinking. I think too many times adults do all of the talking and not enough listening. So we try to listen to the kids, and we get down on one knee so we're at eye level, so we're not talking down to anyone. So I think you have to meet kids where they are. And the other point is that we try to get the kids a toolkit. So the only difference between kids and us is that in our toolkit, we have a few more tools because we're mature. Kids come in, they have an empty bag. And so we want to give them tools so as they proceed through life, maybe they've heard some things that's been told to them before, and they can kind of, reach into a toolkit and know how to handle and how to deal with these things. So I think consistency is a thing that's common in all of us, regardless of what age we are. So we want to be consistent with the school system and what the parents are saying, because we're telling the kids the same thing. And so we have a parent meeting with all the parents, and we let the parents know that if you guys have any problems, if the kids aren't listening, contact us. Maybe we can reach them in a way that you guys weren't able to. Not to step on any parents' toes or questioning their parenting skills, but there's different ways to reach children. And so over the last 25, 30 years, I've experienced that. My kids came through the program My kids' friends came through the program. Those kids have subsequently went to college, graduated with their degrees. So finance, accounting, marketing, there's a whole list of kids that have went through the program. Or kids are working in skilled trades. They're carpenters, electricians. So we know the program works, and it's imperative that we keep the program. So the other thing is the benefit. The benefit is that we're going to have kids that are being in less trouble. If kids are not participating in anything, sometimes they get involved in the wrong thing because two reasons. Their kid is limited, and they have too much free time on their hands. So I understand the whole cost-benefit analysis thing. I understand budgetary finances and the dichotomy of balancing, keeping a program running. And so the return on the investment is the kid that's going to be in less trouble, and the kid that actually has another third person to talk to. If it's not the teacher, if it's not their parent, they can call a coach. And so I've seen a lot of these kids at any basketball game I go to, at the mall, store, where have you, kids are always coming up to me, and they're 30 years old now. Hey, Coach Terry, how you doing? How's it going? So they responded. So we know the program works. And then finally is the importance of the program and retaining it. I know that there's a fee involved because we have officiating, and the officiating is paid. So possibly we can maybe volunteer the officiating out. Now, I know that's going to raise some problems, but each kid in high school has to do volunteer hours. So if we can't pay the refs to keep the cost down, then how could we should possibly be able to have the kids that are volunteering time come officiate the games? And I think the way you pour that off is that you explain to each facility, hey, these games are going to be officiated by high school kids, so cool your horses, because I know the games get intense, and everyone's a competitor. But I think we have to find ways of keeping the cost down to keep the program alive. I think Akron is too big of a city not to have a youth program, and I think that if we want to be who we say we are, then it's imperative that we keep the program around and that we find ways to minimize costs. So cost is not the reason that the program doesn't exist. So I left my contact information. If anyone have any further questions for me, I would love to be a part of a conversation as far as keeping this program alive and viable. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. I'm going to ask Mr. Hafford to speak next, and then we'll open up for questions.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is John Hafford. I've been, my first experience from recreation was a seasonal employee in 1979. So that's like I'm closing in to 40 years of understanding recreation and how it works and the politics and ins and outs of it. My story is the why. Why we have to find a way to fund these programs. And I'm currently part-time at a school, and this was on a wall, so I'm gonna read it, and it says, I woke myself up because we ain't got no alarm clothes basket, because ain't nobody wash my uniform, brush my hair, my teeth in the dark, because the light ain't on. Even got my baby sister ready, because my mama wasn't home. Got us both to school on time to eat us some good breakfast. Then when I got to class, teacher fussed, because I ain't got no pencil. So we had a youth recreation program that went from $50 to $60 to $80, and these kids show up every day to play basketball, but then when it comes time to play, they don't have $80, and they don't have the parents that are going to come up with $80. So if they have 2 kids or 3 kids, they're all out. So who's that person on the other side of it that's going to say, yep, we got to make a way for these kids. We know why it's so important. A lot of people look at the LeBron James that was one of those kids, recreation kids, but I got a whole list of kids that were those kids that didn't have $80, and we found a way to make it happen. So that's why it's so important that we continue to find a way to make it happen for our kids that don't have a voice. So I'm here today because so many of our kids don't have a voice. So they're in the streets playing, they just find a way. But what made Akron so great, and I'm from Mansfield, Ohio, is that Akron has this huge heart. It's amazing that, like, man, I didn't see it where I grew up. Like, Akron is amazing. And it's a generation after generation of people giving back. And now all of a sudden, because the money is tight, we not able to get that why in there. I'm not the person to figure out how to make the budget work. But I know if we don't make a difference in this generation, then we're spending the money on the criminal justice side of things. Because kids are dysfunctional, because when an adult talks to them, they like, who you talking to? Now they're gonna cuss you out because they've never been corrected by adult, they've never been coached by adult, they never learned to win or lose, accept it. So many things our kids get from a coach that dad's not there. I work with so many kids right now, dad's not there. And you think it's because he's not in the home, because no, he's probably incarcerated. So many of our kids like that. And they become very angry. So we have to find out how we can make this happen for our kids. To go for $80 in Joy Park, I know for sure, we had 11, 12 teams. This year there's just 4 teams. What are those kids doing? Where are they at? What are we providing for them? Even a place that they can just go and play. Just a rec place. It could be one of these schools. Yep, if you're not on team, we still got something for you. Right now, if you're not on team, we have nothing for you. You can't even get in the gym because they're practicing. With that, thank you.
Okay, thank you, gentlemen. Want to open it up for committee to ask questions, but I want to point to something Councilwoman Sims said about the police thing. You know, some of our programs, we don't understand the full benefit of them because they work. So we don't have the cost of children getting in trouble. And, you know, some things you never get a chance to see just how impactful it is because it's doing its job. But here, you know, this is a dynamic that, you know, all of us face. You know, finances are real no matter on what level, be it personal or be it with the city. But I want these gentlemen to come in just to share, and this is to put in perspective what we've been talking about when we talk about creating equitable policy, is understanding the total impact of any policy that we implement. So I just want to open it up to anybody on committee that may have a question, and then after committee, we'll open it up to council, and then we'll, Ms. Samples.
Thank you. Mr. Hafford, I have some questions for you. You said this year you guys went from 11 teams to 4?
4 teams, and that's more parents are willing to pay for 8 to 10-year-olds, so that's 2 teams. 1 team 8 to 10, 1 team 14 to 17-year-old kids. Last year was 5 8 to 10-year-old teams, and 5 11 to 13-year-old teams.
When does the season start?
We register kids from starting in November through December, and the games start the day after Martin Luther King birthday. This year they're all doing all games on Saturday.
So they've already started playing?
Yes.
So
the first Saturday was a snow day, so the second Saturday after that, yes.
Until when? When does the season conclude?
They typically go 8 games, so 8 weeks. And I've been taking kids to games, so they are well attended. They are well attended.
So when you talk about it, you said it was $80 per kid?
$80 per child.
So it doesn't matter how many kids are in the family, it's just $80?
In the past, recreation supervisors had some leeway, and all of us this last year is all about trying to either break even, which recreation is, we're never going to break even. But we have to turn kids away now because, okay, but I have to say we have to break even, so we have to turn kids away. But they do scholarship a few kids, though. Each center supervisor can scholarship some kids, but if you have a home that has 3 kids or multiple kids, you got a problem.
$20. Yeah. So after the 8 games, then what? Is there like a spring or summer season for the kids? Is that something that's even been thought about doing for them?
The Recreation Department has yet to really fully utilize the CLCs to keep programming going. So we have coaches that want to have these traveling teams. And it's actually a good thing because you have adults supervising kids, and the more adults we can get to supervise kids, the better. So if they have a traveling team, yes, let's let them in the buildings, If we have nonprofit organizations, like we have the Boys and Girls Club that wants to do a program, or there's other agencies that want to do programs, let's let them utilize these buildings and put them in the CLCs.
So my last question is, when you say you have 11 teams in the past, except for this year, just a number, if you can think in your head, just a roundabout approximate, how much does it normally cost when you have 11 teams to fund the children in the program, total across the board?
Like, I'm not sure how much, because you have seasonal employee costs, you have the official costs, the uniform costs, so I know we never break even, but that's not our goal. Me as a supervisor, I'm not thinking about breaking even. My thought is, how do we provide a service, quality service, be a good steward, provide a quality service for our kids?
Right.
Because it's kind of emotional with me when turning kids away.
Right.
I get kind of emotional about that.
Right.
Because we help those kids that need it most.
Right. So when you say break even, how
The
much?
city of Akron Recreation had this philosophy this past year like never before. Like, I actually have a camp where it's 9 to 11. But if you turn 12 and you're a part of it, now I'm gonna make you a volunteer. You can come for free.
Right.
And it works so well. Kids are looking forward to it. I get to be a volunteer, but we can't do that with the current philosophy of we gotta charge every kid. It's gotta break even. And what was disappointing to me is breaking even, but we didn't get basketballs, we didn't get jump ropes, we got no supplies. There's nobody advocating for these kids to make sure we even have supplies. Arts and crafts is so hard to get those things. There's a reason why we can't get them. Or
How many kids are on each team?
what's that?
How many kids are on each team?
So it's a maximum of 10, but like say if we get at least 7 or 8 kids by registration deadline, we can always add 2 more, because we're always going to order 10 uniforms. So we can always add 1 or 2 kids to roster to max out to 10.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to talk to you afterwards, Mr. Hafford.
Excuse me, I just have a couple other points I want to point out. This is a co-ed program. It's co-ed, boys, girls.
Right.
And so one of the things that we do, we want to empower all the participants to let them know that basketball is not who you are, it's something that you do. And so at the end of every season, we throw a banquet. I get a couple of guys that I know that I've coached with, and we buy trophies for the kids, and we have a banquet. And we have each kid come up, and I tell them at the beginning of the season that you're going to do a speech at the end of the season, and the speech is, what are your other talents? And you can't say, I want to become a professional basketball player. That's not part of it. We want to know what else that you do outside of basketball. So we try to empower the kids, and we try to push them to higher heights by letting them know that there's other things that you can do, because not every kid is going to play basketball. We know that for a fact. And now we're starting to see that in some of the kids that, like my son, he's 23. Some of the kids now, some of those kids came through the program, they went to play for their high school, they went to college, and now basketball is over for them. A couple of them went over and played overseas, but they realized that that wasn't the ticket, and that they were not going to be able to earn a living by playing overseas. So those kids are back home now. Luckily, and thank God, they paid attention and they got their degrees, so now they can go into the workforce. But they're not, all is lost because I can't play basketball. There's only a small fraction. We tell them 1 in 10,000 actually will make it, so they can earn a living through playing basketball. So at Ed Davis, traditionally we've had 30 teams. We have 20 or so, 8 to 10, and as it goes on. So I think if we look at where our expenses are coming from, the large part is probably through the officiating and probably the personnel that it takes to run the table. So what I propose is that we find ways to reduce the officiating costs by going through the volunteer program, or maybe have the older kids in the 14 and 16 division say that you'll play for free if you agree to officiate an 8 to 10 game. So there's ways, I'm sure if we collectively put our heads together, there's ways to minimize that cost, because $80 is a lot. And it's something that when I see parents out, I ask them if they're participating, and they say no because the cost. And then they say, well, we only get a t-shirt, and people like to get bang for the buck. That's just the way human society is. They're getting a t-shirt, and they're saying, where's the trophy at? You know, so I don't get into those details, but it's imperative that we get that $80 back to something that's affordable, because our mission statement says through safe, affordable recreation opportunities. That's the mission statement of the ARP. I have it right here.
The one thing I like to add is, you look at recreation, it does amazing things all summer. In a lot of those concerts, you know, people are not, don't actually, they're not. You look at recreation, it does amazing things all summer. In a lot of those concerts, you know, people are not, don't actually, they're not actually Akron residents.
Right.
But these kids that come to the center and they have to walk to get there, and there's not enough money for them, but concerts are free. So those are thousands of dollars, and they're scheduling concerts right now.
Right.
Those are thousands of dollars that go to anyone that wants to come. And like, again, they're not Akron residents, maybe some, maybe not. But these kids that come every day, they have to pay. So if a lot of stuff can be free, why can't it still be free for these kids?
Right. Right. Thank you.
Stuff can be free, why can't it still be free for these kids?
Right. Right. Thank you.
I see Mr. Fusco. Is there anybody else on committee before I make a comment, and then I'll go folks off the committee? You know, just as I'm listening to this, one of the things, I don't know if any of you heard, I want to comment on one thing you said about volunteer refs. I was listening to the news, and the Ohio High School Athletic Association talked about how there's a dire need for referees. Most of the referees are 60 or over. Most of the young people quit because they don't want to deal with the mess from the parents. And I say that because that right there, in and of itself, in partnering with, you know, the Ohio Athletic Association or that's a job. That's a volunteer that could lead to a job for some of these people. So I think you hit something on the head where we can find a way to incorporate teaching our young people how to ref. I know I'm thinking of the City of Akron's own Lance Bell. Lance is a referee for, I think, basketball and football, high school basketball or high school football. He can speak frankly to that point, so I appreciate that. But it just reflects the challenge that we have now. I want to leave this in council's mind as we go into really looking into our budget closely. You know, we sent back we sent back 60,000 right off the rip of our My Neighborhood, our Akron City Council grant dollars, because we didn't take time to really evaluate how we can impact our neighborhoods. This is one way we could equitably impact all of our neighborhoods, just by supporting the recreation. But we've got to have the conversations to know what's going on to be able to do that. I have a few more comments, but I know Mr. Fusco has requested, so Mr. Fusco.
Thank you, Mr. Neal. Thank you, and welcome here. Mr. Hafford worked together for years and years and years, and Mr. Moore, is that right? Yeah. Thank you for all your years of service. As one who was over at Recreation for about 10 years, as well as coached for about 5 years for the Boys and Girls Club, I can appreciate exactly where you're coming from and the value that the children have, as well as the parents too. And we had talked before in the past about a program we put together years and years ago, and then the recession had hit, which if you recall those days, way back when. But there's a lot of added value here. And especially if you're able to get coaches in there who, you know, are going to ask those questions, like we used to always, did you do your homework? Did you get it done? Do you need help? Because we used to have help, you know, homework tables and so on and so forth. But of course, as we all know, that costs money. And I don't know, you know, all the facts in terms of, you know, the increase and so on and so forth. And I see Mr. Valleys here. I don't know if he was aware of this meeting or not, but it's only fair, I think, to find out, you know, the other side of it. So I'd ask Mr. Valley to come forward and at least, you know, give him an opportunity to say a few words.
Just a moment. Yeah, the meeting was publicized, and I've shared that we're going through using Park and Rec as an example to truly understand this thing that we talk about creating equitable policy. It's not related to, it's related to everything that we do. This is a good testing ground to understand. just before we go,
Well, I have a couple of questions for Mr. Valley, if that's okay.
yeah, I'll get to
It just
Mr.
seemed like
Valley.
it would be fair.
Yes, I'll get to Mr. Valley. But I want to put this in context. This is not pointing fingers. I think that's the one thing we have to understand. This is just a reality that money is tight for everybody. The city, when you think of $10 a game for somebody that works and has a certain income, $10 a game isn't bad, you know? But when you think of somebody that relates to the poem that he just read, that's
Mr. Neal, I totally understand.
I understand, but
I'm just saying,
I think
let's be fair.
I want just the fact of saying be fair, I think makes it seem like we are attacking the city. That is not the case. What we want to understand is when we implement a policy, it is always going to impact our constituents. We want to make sure that it is equitable as possible. I mean, we just had the conversation about some of the other things that we were talking about last week. The tow truck. That was a policy that was set up a long time ago. I was ignorant of the fact that the tow truck policy was set up when retired police officers were the one who got the contract originally. So it excluded a whole group of people.
Well, all I'm saying, Mr. Neal, I know it's your committee, and thank you for calling upon me. I was just saying, just like to hear both sides, because we all understand here the value and the cost.
What I want to share is that everyone was aware of this meeting. Mr. Valley is here. You know I'll give him a chance to speak. What I want to put into context, we always go on the defensive right off the bat. These gentlemen have been serving the city 25 years. How much does a coach get paid? Doesn't get paid anything. He's down here to help us improve this. So please, let's keep that in context. This is not an attack.
Thank you for sharing.
This is not an attack on the city. We're trying to improve the quality of, holistic quality of the program. Now, before I go to Mr. Valley, is there anybody else who wanted anything to say? Mrs. Sims?
Yeah, and I would say to that point, this is kind of like where the rubber meets the road. I've had the privilege to work with John for about 30 years, and my friend here probably equal as long. But I just want to remind us too, as we look at the recreational budget, and certainly not an attack on Mr. Valley. He's always been readily available for us for questions or what have you. We still have a recreational budget that's less than 1% of our overall budget. And we've had this conversation time and time again. We still don't really have a plan around recreation that is targeted in a real way towards our youth. And to have them come here today and talk about real issues where it hits the real rubber on the real road, I think is important for us to hear and for them to say, so that when we're allocating these limited resources, we're doing that looking through that lens. And so I think I appreciate, it's not it's not his meeting, it's his meeting.
Go ahead and finish, please, Mrs. Sims.
And so I would hope that we be looking and be appreciative that we have these other voices in the conversation to help us as legislators as we look at our budget and how we're allocating resources, whether we're doing as adequate of a job that we need to do as far as our youth are concerned. And so, again, I appreciate the gentleman being here. I appreciate that we do and always have had the resource of Mr. Valley, who has always been very responsible to, I would say, at least I would venture to say all of us, but I think this was a conversation that just needed to be had so that we can hear voices again from those where the rubber meets the road. So thank you. Venture to say all of us, but I think this was a conversation that just needed to be had so that we can hear voices again from those where the rubber meets the road. So thank you.
Okay, Mr. Valley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. The only bits and pieces that I heard after I walked in was charging. Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. The only bits and pieces that I heard after I walked in was charging kids for different programs and this and that, and also not being able to order supplies and things like that. Well, first of all, we just did our park survey and presented our strategic plan to council, I believe, 2-3 weeks ago. Different programs and this and that, and also not being able to order supplies and things like that. Well, first of all, we just did our park survey and presented our strategic plan to council, I believe, 2-3 weeks ago. And you guys know in that survey that we heard from 1,500 residents throughout the entire city of Akron. Every neighborhood was represented, every community center. That we heard from 1,500 residents throughout the entire city of Akron. Every neighborhood was represented, every community center, every ward in the city was represented in that survey. And the common theme that kept coming back is recreation is not only fun, but it's very affordable with all our programming. So we do have a strategic plan that we are in the city was represented in that survey. And the common theme that kept coming back is recreation is not only fun, but it's very affordable with all our programming. So we do have a strategic plan that we are developing, but I did hear something about not being able to order supplies and things like that. Our Recreation Bureau gets a budget each year, and we live within that budget. We've had the same amount of full-time employees in the Recreation Bureau that we've had for the last, since I became the Director of the Department of Neighborhood Assistance in 2012. We've always had the same amount of part-time, but I did hear something about not being able to order supplies and things like that. Our Recreation Bureau gets a budget each year, and we live within that budget. We've had the same amount of full-time employees in the Recreation Bureau that we've had for the last, since I became the Director of the Department of Neighborhood Assistance in 2012. We've always had the same amount of help. We always have about 100 seasonals at any given time. We had that same amount of budgeted last year and the year before that. So we take the budget that's presented and what council passes, and each one of our community centers, they're responsible to live within that budget, and they do a heck of a job doing that. Now, another thing I heard was sometimes our gyms aren't accessible. John Hafford, who retired at the Joy Park Community Center this past November, I used to get complaints from the community and sometimes council that why isn't the Joy Park gym open for our youth in our community? So if we're not doing enough for youth basketball and things like that in our community, and you ask an expert witness, I guess, to come and testify today, I got complaints that his gym was never open there. So, I mean, I'm not trying to make a personal attack or attack anybody's character here, but we just need to know all the facts.
Well, I understand.
Testify before
I would like to respond to that. When you have a Boys and Girls Club that dominates the gym and the facility, it means you locking out the kids that just walk and drop in. So the way it's set up at Joy Park now, right, you're going to have kids that are turned away every single day because you have organized programs. When you brought the Boys and Girls Clubs in there, that means you locked out the neighborhood kids that just can't walk and come and play. So that was way before I came back and saw the difference in how the community changed, but I didn't have a decision in that.
John, you were more concerned about using community centers in different neighborhoods and running youth basketball programs in different neighborhoods, and you weren't so much concerned about your own Joy Park Center.
See, that's unacceptable. Folks, can we ever have a grown-up conversation down here about how we can move things forward without taking things personal? I mean, because I tell you, there's a problem. It's just different. When I grew up, we say, hey, let's go meet down at the baseball field. We're going to play. But even on the fields, you get kicked off the field, and I've seen it happen down there at Erie Island. You can't be down here because the football team has the field.
Right.
It's a different era now. What we're trying to do is when we come together and we have discussions, to see how we can better serve our community. Now, from the economic standpoint, before we even go back to the administration to ask them, this council reduced the My Neighborhood of Akron grant by $60,000. This council sent back, after reducing it, sent back $10,000. This council did that. We didn't look to see how we can better utilize that money to serve our community, our constituents. Folks, we got to quit playing politics down here, quit posturing, and really do the work of understanding how the policies and things that we put in place impact our constituents. Mr. Kilby, then I'll get to you, Mr.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks for coming down, gentlemen. And,
Thank you.
I just want to say, this isn't a subject I know a lot about. I think youth recreation is a very important role in any society, but I've been listening to everybody. It's a good conversation. I would just say this, with all due respect, John, we spend a lot of money on a survey, and the kids that these men encounter on the basketball court or whatever, I don't think anyone asked them their opinion. That's
not true.
And these fellas probably have talked to these kids, and these council people on this side of the horseshoe that are in touch with their communities have been, you know, have approached them. I'm not done yet. Wait,
Yes,
I'm
sir.
almost done. I'll let you speak. But I just think the survey doesn't tell the whole story. I think these fellas know the true story. And these council people that support this know what's going on in our city.
Thank you, Mr. Kilby. I mean, each one of us has a different perspective, and the only way you get it is when you have honest, open dialogue. And so, Mr. Hardy's been waiting, so Mr. Hardy, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I wholeheartedly agree with you that we are, and I thought we were, and I still think we are, of one mind that recreation is an essential city service. This city, through the support of the mayor and city council, did the most robust survey of the residents since the Ballard Report in '69. And Councilman Kilby's comment, and I'm not saying this in a negative sense, is inaccurate because every rec employee was talking with iPad in hand to kids on courts, at school, at everywhere, to make sure their voices were heard in those 3,100 voices that were surveyed. And we would work with City Council if youth basketball is something that they feel strongly about. We have a good, strong youth basketball program. We've actually been looking at, as part of the youth violence prevention program, how we can expand that. But I had no idea, John and I had no idea that Mr. Haffer was coming in. There are a lot of folks in rec who would love to come down to youth basketball, who are still employed, who are still doing things. And we can look at the data in that survey and pull that data out and really look at what segments of our community we're looking at youth basketball. We want to have that kind of a relationship. But we had no idea this conversation was coming in. So it would be helpful for us if that's something that this committee wants to look at. We would love to look at that also. We can do that collaboratively, but it did feel a little strange, this interaction, because we've been making really good progress. And only to my last point, and then I promise I'll sit down, I would just respectfully disagree with Councilwoman Sims. We do have a plan. Again, it was presented to council 2 weeks ago. It was the response of, again, the most robust survey that we have done in over 4 decades of this community. Now, that doesn't mean that council doesn't have its voice. So again, if youth basketball or something like that is something that this committee and council wants to look at, we're open to that. But I don't want to let that hang that we don't have a plan. There is a plan. It's well-informed. It's data-informed. It's informed by the community. It's not set in stone. We can work through it. But a lot of people did a lot of work in 2018 to come up with a plan, and I just don't want us to leave here with any doubt that there is a strong path forward, and we welcome council's input on that.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Hardy. Again, I'll let you, well, let me let you speak, Ms. Sims, and then I'll go right back.
So, Mr. Hardy, to your point, I was talking specifically about an overall youth plan. As you know, in your recreational report, I did still have concerns about that. The way we did our surveys, who we surveyed, what was the percentage? I still don't have that number of the folks who lived in Akron and who didn't live in Akron. And so it's not like I thought it was 100%, but that wasn't a question. So I don't want you to think that I was saying we're not trying to develop a plan. The overall plan as it relates to our youth, we don't have one.
So Mr. Chairman, I would only respond that all of the breakdown of the demographics is in that slide deck that we gave to you. And so if you have any questions about the zip codes, what areas of town, how many, all of that is broken down for you in that slide deck that we presented to council. But again, we welcome working with council on it's a really robust plan, but y'all are city council, so if there are specific programs that you feel strongly about, we'll welcome those conversations collaboratively.
I appreciate that. Just a second, Mr. Kilby. I just, again, want to put some things in context. These kind of discussions are important. Again, I'm hoping that we can grow to where we can have the discussions and not take things personally. This is the only way we're going to get this information. The survey that was taken, the gentlemen that are coaching are basically dealing with a policy that was put in place before the survey was completed. I can tell you that I've had people walk up to me, I asked them to come in and speak. And it shouldn't matter who I have come in to speak. I mean, they came in to share their experience. There are others, and I'd love to have time down the road to hear, because as I have shared, I did share this with council, that we were going to use Park and Rec as a way to understand what it means when we talk about creating equitable policy, because it is probably one of the more easier things to deal with. Everyone could probably understand that. When we talk about, we've had folks coming down here talking about creating equitable access to government contracts for years, but we haven't formed a special committee. We haven't done a thing to address that as a council. Park and Rec people can understand. It's safer. So again, I don't want us to ever take any of this stuff personally, but we do have to understand as legislators how when we do the things that we do, how it impacts our community. Like I said, for the money that we sent back, for the money we cut out of the My Neighborhood, Our Grant program, we could have taken care of this easily. I like the suggestions that came across from these young men because it serves two things. There is a shortage of referees. There's not really a training program. We could put these two things in place and create an opportunity where these young men could go away and get, get jobs. I think you have to be 18 to be a referee in high school. So I appreciate the comments from everybody. We have Mr. Kilby, and then if there aren't any more, we'll wrap up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to say this about the survey. You know, Mr. Hardy describes it as robust, whatever that means, strong, well-funded. Sometimes a survey can reach the conclusion that you told them to reach. Now, I still say this, with all due respect. The kids weren't directly surveyed, even though indirectly you say these recreation leaders talk to them. And then, secondly, I want to say this: in a democratic society, it's really good that the administration wants to negotiate a little bit. This conversation is good, and come up with a reasonable compromise. That's what politics really is, compromise. But we, the council, represent the people. We're the closest elected officials in this city to the people. So when these council people say they think there's a need to get a little more money for recreation, I think the administration should listen to us and not just some survey that was paid well to do a robust survey to justify not doing so.
Okay, Mr. Fusco, Mr. Hardy, Mr. Valley, then Mr. Mr. Mobian, and then Mr. You just playing with me. Then Mr. Hafford. Then we'll summarize this conversation. So in that order, please.
Thank you, Mr. Neal. And maybe fair was too harsh of a word, but I just thought if we're going to have these discussions about budget and about this and that, we should have both sides, the administrative side as well as, and that's all I was saying. I am all ears whenever it comes to talking about these kind of issues. I do have a little bit of experience in terms of, dealing with budgets and so on and so forth. And I do understand that our budget is painfully low whenever it comes to recreation. However, though, we're the ones charged with these decisions on, practically, weekly basis. But many of us do more than that. But the thing of it is, though, is that, like I said, we have got to work all together, collect all information, all of it, basically at the same time, I think is going to be productive for all of us. Thank you.
I may have been out of, I do want to acknowledge the councilwoman first, because she asked, and then you, then Mr. Hardy, then Mr. Hafford. Mr. Moby?
First of all, I'd just like to thank you, gentlemen, for coming down. And I hope you don't feel that this has been disrespectful to you at all. From my perspective, you're only adding more information to what we've already collected through the survey. I know surveys are pretty much a snapshot in time to give us information, and any additional information that we get is always helpful to dial into the pot, because every neighborhood is different. And we know that some of the neighborhoods, you can garner more resources because of the people that live in the neighborhood. And there are some neighborhoods where we have to give more public dollars and do more things because they can't generate the kind of resources. So we know that. And if we choose to ignore that, that's part of the reality that we face in this community and every community. So I thank you very much for coming down. And I don't want us to think in terms of us arguing about this. We know that the more positive recreational services that we can provide to our young people, the better off they are, the better off our community is. We have less crime, less of everything that's negative for communities. So the more we can dial into this pot of what can we provide to our communities, the better off we all are. So I thank you for the information you brought down. And, the survey that we got was pretty thorough and detailed. There's no question about that. I don't know anything about what you're referencing when it comes to Joy Park and how they utilize facilities. I do know that I still get questions and concerns about the utilization of our CLCs. When we put that on the ballot, obviously we didn't clearly explain to people because there were some details we did not know. We made it sound as if the CLCs would be available to the public when school was not in session. We talked about that repeatedly when we did the campaign for that levy issue, because I was there at the time we did it. We didn't talk about the fees that people would have to pay, the insurance costs and all of those things, because I don't know if we even knew all of that stuff at the time. We hadn't dialed it in. We were trying to pass the levy, and we made it clear that when school was not in session, the CLCs and all these other facilities would be available to do some additional recreational services for kids late in the evening. So when we think about everything, we're really trying to figure out how do we serve our community and the needs of all these kids, and we have a wide range of children that we have to service. How do we do it on the city's budget with additional resources hopefully coming in through grants and other ways, and free services to adults? How do we do all of this? So I thank you for coming, and I appreciate the information. And this is always an area that we are probably never going to be able to fully service, but as long as we can hear our voices and try to do as best we can, I think that's what we're all trying to do. Thank you.
Mr. Valley?
Thank you. First of all, for Councilwoman at Large Mobian, our community learning centers are much more accessible to the public. 99% of every usage, there's no cost associated. We've been looking at the insurance liabilities, and we've come a long way in the last couple of years on that. But back to Mr. Kilby's comments about the kids not being involved in this process or the process. First of all, our recreation supervisors and recreation as a whole are some of the most dedicated employees that we have in the city of Akron. I think everybody here can agree with that. They are so in tune with their constituency at their community centers. What are their needs? What programs do they want? And they tailor make each one of the community centers around the active adults or the youth or whatever the programming, the demand is at that community center. These recreation centers are not being managed out of Balt Street. They're being supervised at the level at each community center based on it. And one of the things that we did see in our survey and what we talked about in our strategic plan, Ed Davis. Ed Davis is a youth basketball community center. That's the biggest demand, the biggest need in that neighborhood, in that community center. But you know what, though? We need to expand our horizons at Ed Davis. They need to have more programming we need to reach out to our adults and things like that. But there's got to be other programming just other than basketball. If you look at the Northwest Community Center, it's big in the arts, it's huge in the dance and ceramics and things like that. They don't have a gymnasium at that community center, so obviously youth basketball is not a big plan or a big program there. But we do have youth basketball for the northwest portion of the city of Akron. But the youth are involved. We're constantly talking to the kids to find out what their needs are. And just like when we run our summer camps during the summertime, each one of our community centers have summer camps. It's based on the programming that these kids are asking for. So with that, kids were involved in our survey, but kids are surveyed every single day at our community centers. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Hardy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, I just want to echo what John, Councilwoman Amobian said. Linda and I served together on the school board. We heard a lot of those concerns as the CLCs were coming online on this side of the aisle, if you will, the street. We're still hearing them, and it came up in the survey, as we talked about 2 weeks ago, that the CLCs still, people are having a hard time figuring out where to access them. So I totally agree that that's an area where we have sincere opportunity. But I just want to say, as we wrap up this conversation, we welcome robust opinions about recreation, but we're going to work off the same facts. And I just want to say again, for the record, on behalf of that incredible crew of folks that you saw here 2 weeks ago, who spent countless hours unpaid because they did this out of how excited they were. This was part of their job, but not also. All of the recreation staff that work hard to collect that survey, on their behalf, on the record, I fully reject any assertion that that survey, Councilman Kilme, was in any way, shape, or form rigged or focused the way we wanted it to be done. I have, and we provided it to the council office, a stack 2 inches thick of responses to all the open-ended questions. So even after all the questions that we generated, we gave people opportunity to say, what do you want to see? And they could pick anything, and my goodness, there's some wild stuff in there. But it's all available, and they went through it. So on behalf of all the work they did, you might not agree with the survey in terms of the results, that's fine. But I don't want on their behalf for us to ever worry about the integrity of that survey. They did a great job. And again, we welcome robust conversation about how to move our programs forward. But I just wanted to say that again, that they did such a wonderful job. That survey is as legit as I've ever seen. But as Councilwoman Amobian said, it's a big chunk, not all, and we welcome continued input.
Okay, thank you. And I think we have different ways of saying it. Maybe we could say it a little bit more palatable for all of us. But I think we're all on the same page. Mr. Hafford?
Thank you. It is an honor to be here, to be a voice for these kids. That's why I'm here. I'm not being paid. Somebody mentioned something about bringing paid people. I don't think you need paid people, because sometimes they're looking about their paycheck and what they say, So it's good to have the community. They just want to serve. They just want to give back. My only purpose for being here is to be a voice to the community. And I have a lot of experience working as a center supervisor, community center coordinator. I understand recreation very well. One thing that happens in recreation is the passion and the love. I agree. And the one thing that doesn't happen in recreation was evidence today, just thanking us, just thanking. How can she say thank you and you not say thank you? Your attitude is It's not what it should be right now. How can you serve us, serve me, and you don't understand? Now I'm that person that you're here to hear my voice and make that difference. A survey is good to me after 5 to 10 years. So I'll do a survey this year, and then next year, and then next year, and then next year, and the puzzle starts coming together. One survey, one day. It's like one date, and you're going to get married. I don't think it's going to work. So surveys are good in their place, but the passionate people that you will put before you will tell you the direction we need to go. I'm on my way to mentor some kids right now, so I have to leave. But thank you all for this city of Akron that you serve. It's a wonderful place. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I want to thank everyone for their input, and I want to understand. I'm trying to give us a different picture to understand when it comes to, and I was glad to hear you say this, Mr. Fusco, we control the budget. If this is important to us, if we want to support those residents that come out and give their volunteer hours, then we've got to find a way to find some more money. We've got to understand the budget so that we can better support what's taking place. We're all ignorant of something, but once we're aware of that ignorance, we are accountable to how we respond. To stay ignorant just so we don't do something is a bad thing. I just put it like that. Mrs. Sims, and then we'll wrap up.
I think all of us appreciated the group that came here and shared their findings and all of the work that went forth for them to accumulate the data that they had to share with us. But again, part of what we see in the responses were relational, what those kids' relationship was to the director of the center. I still am not convinced that it was amenities-wise, because you don't know what you can't have or what you can have when you don't have it. I mean, I don't go and order shrimp from McDonald's because it's not on the menu. So to convince me to buy shrimp at McDonald's is very difficult. We need to be surveying our kids or the people who are accessing the centers based on what is possible and not what they've become accustomed to. So those are two different factors. Yeah, lots of hard work went into the surveys, and we appreciate the work, but we still have a kind of an inequity when it comes related to amenities, and I'll go on record as saying that. And so that's the thing I think that we're able to get at even further when we have, again, these voices coming down who are there day in and day out. We're doing the work where the rubber meets the road. So again, I think they add to the conversation. It helps us to have a clearer picture of what some of the needs are that may not come out in the survey. And I still say we underfund Parks and Recreation. And I'm glad that we all would agree that as the legislative body, we can control some of that. And I hope that, Mr. Valley, that you're advocating as well so that we can support where you think we need additional resources. But again, less than 1% of our budget, as much as we tout the importance of recreation, is do we earmark for Parks and Recreation? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Mr. Gilbert.
Everything comes down to money in a society like this and a city like this, and I know money is a very scarce commodity for us. So we have to really be smart where we allocate our resources. Now, we're going to be doing the budget here in a few weeks, I guess, operating budget, and I think this council should look very, very hard at where you can get a substantial amount of money to do what the people want, which is more recreation for the youth. And I think the place they should look is the mayor's office, and their budget for salaries is inflated. We don't need all those people in his cabinet. We could cut a couple, and they would still function perfectly. But we could use that money for the kids of this city.
Okay, Mr. Kilby, I don't want to get started. Again, folks, I appreciate everyone's comment, but I want us to be able to stay focused on the issue, and the reality of it is that this council, I understand, sir, but the reality of it is that this council needs to understand that, one, the budget, so that we can address it adequately. 1%, that's a reflection on us. We're the ones that direct where the monies go for the budget. And we had an opportunity, and I'm not, it's just fact. You may want to call it grandstanding, but it's just fact. We had an opportunity to have a tool to help us understand how we utilize our budget. So now we're going to go into this thing like a blind squirrel trying to find a nut. We understand that we've got to increase our budget, but how are we going to understand when we take the money from one resource, how it impacts the overall budget? But the responsibility lies on us. So I truly do appreciate what everyone said. As we go forward, through Park and Rec, we will continue to look at ways we could be equitable in everything that we do. We'll be analyzing more things that we do. Long-standing practices, and I'll name one of them. Mr. Valley and I have had this conversation. It used to be that when a group got the field, they got the concession stand. Well, we got 30, 40 groups that may want to use that field, and they can't get the concession stand because we've given the rights to one group. That has to change. So there'll be other things that we'll be talking about in Park and Rec that hopefully we can translate into other things that we do within the city and how our policies impact folks. So I appreciate Mr. Moore. I'll extend my appreciation to Mr. Hafford. I appreciate everyone's comments. Again, this is not a, never want us to take that we're on opposing sides. We all bring something unique to the table because collectively we've got to find a way to support those folks that are in Park and Rec and meet the goals and objectives that our citizens want and that we want. So I see where Mr. Freeman, it looks like you may want to say one thing.
Just for the record, while I do enjoy, cashews and whatnot, I would not consider myself a blind squirrel.
That's the best analogy I could give, sir. So thank you, everyone. Appreciate it. With this, adjourn? If I can have a motion for us to adjourn, please. Thank you.
Okay. Rules has been canceled. Public Utilities is next. Well, no, it doesn't make any sense. Do old business, new business. I don't know what's on the old business. You can take time, you can refer. Well, then get it over, call for the vote. Call for the vote. Or pull it, whatever you want to do. You afraid to piss somebody off? She might. Some shit. That's an ugly ass move. 2 minutes?
No, we're not doing 2 minutes. We're doing now. If we could start public utilities, all committee members are present. Can I get a motion for approval of our previous meeting minutes from January 14th?
How you doing, sir?
Can I get a motion? Can I get a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Second.
Opposed? Okay. We have one piece of old business, ordinance prohibiting any city of Akron utility bill to exceed 150% of the average of the previous 12 monthly bills, provided that the excess water usage was not intended by the property owner. This was offered by Mr. Kilby, so I will defer to Mr. Kilby on this matter. Mr. Kilby?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I introduced this. It's dated December 11th, 2018, and that's good. We're into February. We're taking our time, having a robust discussion about this, and that's the way things should get worked out in a democratic society. Now, I just would like to, I read over most of the information the administration has provided us. It's all good information, and I'm pleased that the administration decided to implement a policy 2 years ago. Now, I guess I got a series of questions if somebody, and I read over these charts, and probably the only one that probably I thought was valuable was the one for, let's see, 2017, it reflected an entire year to partial. So let me ask Mr. Hardy, I don't know who put these together, but somebody here should be able to answer a couple questions that are on this here. Mr. Hardy, this is what I'm talking about. And so I add this up to this policy, which we're doing now, cost the city, well, it didn't cost us anything. It's just water we never charged for. So we have an abundance of water. This water didn't even go down sewers. So really, it's just water. And we're flushing water down the sewers every day to keep them flowing 24/7. So we're saying we lost revenue of $576,148.75 in 2017, and that's leaks, toilet leaks, burst water pipes, and unknown underground leaks. Is that accurate, Mr. Hardy?
What that handout states is that under our utility bill relief policy, we provided relief at those dollar amounts for those issues to property owners during that time period to relieve them of excess charges relating to those instances, whether they be a leaky toilet, burst pipe, or unknown underground leak.
Okay, I'm asking, is this number that I just threw out here, I added up these three, there's no total on this, it says $276,501.67 for leak toilets, $192,753.26 for burst water pipes, and then unknown underground leaks was $108,893.83. I didn't have a calculator, but I did it the old-fashioned way. I put them in columns, and I come to $576,148,075. Is that the amount of lost revenue, I guess we should be looking at it? Is that what you would, that's what this chart
I would not
reflects to me?
characterize that as lost revenue. I would characterize that, again, as relief under the policy for excess charges relating to those three particular issues, and those were verified instances of those issues for property owners. So again, it wasn't revenue that we should be collecting in our minds. That's why we have the relief policy. It's to give relief when we have those issues.
So we just wrote it off, in other words. Okay, that's okay, we can agree on that. Secondly, I looked over your policy, and you know, I think it's good you have a policy, but I think it leaves something to be desired. And you said repeatedly, Mr. Hardy, that anybody's eligible for it, you know? Just like when someone busts a wheel going out down the street, hitting a pothole, and they call the law department, and they say, yeah, I'll send you out a form, a claim form. Anybody's allowed to get a claim form, and we all know very few of those people ever collect a dime. So my point is this. The relief policy, in theory, anybody can apply for it, but in fact, half the people of this city are renters, and if their landlord, who might own multiple houses, is late over here on the other side of town on one account, this poor renter, even though he may meet every one of these qualifications, can't get any relief. So he's stuck. Either he pays the bill or the landlord, he skips out and the landlord pays the bill. Or doesn't, and maybe some of these landlords go bankrupt. We never collect it. But I guess what I'm saying, and I'd like to reach a reasonable compromise, because, you know, I understand this legislation leaves a lot to be desired. There's all kinds of loopholes somebody could drive a semi through. But I would like to see the administration really look at maybe doubling the budget, because if almost 600, let's say $600,000 is what we wrote off in 2017, if we doubled that, it would only be like $1.2 million. And I've looked at the sewer capital fund, and there's adequate funds even after we take out the unencumbered, I mean the encumbered amount that's earmarked for the CSO program. I don't think $1.2 million the city writes off would bankrupt the sewer capital fund. I don't think we'd have to raise the rates for the people. I think we could do that and all look good. And maybe if the city administration wants to tweak it a little bit, let's just say people live in houses that maybe have been there for 3 years. They're not fly-by-night renters, okay? And this argument about slum landlords, I think it's kind of like a bogus argument because I've thought a lot about that. I own a couple rental properties, and the last thing any landlord is going to ignore is the plumbing. It's toilets, pipes, because he knows if his tenants can't pay it, he's going to get stuck paying it. So it's kind of like creating this here straw man argument. Okay, here's those evil slum landlords, and you beat the crap up, and it ignores the issue. The issue is there's people in this city that are renters, that are responsible people, that are getting stuck with outrageous, when this happens, when there's a calamity. And just the fact that they don't own that house, they're precluded from getting any relief. I don't think that's right, and I don't think that's fair. So that's my point of view. We can talk it some more. I don't really think this is ready to come to a vote or anything, but I think the team, the administration's team, ought to look very, very deeply into some of the things I said. And this is basically the will of a lot of people. The people that support this on this side of the horseshoe, in some ways, I think, are the most in touch with regular people in this city. And we don't need to take a survey to know that people are upset about the high sewer rates, which is really driving this. So,
Okay, Mr. Hardy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Wow, so much to unpack there. So let's start with the fact that I have always, this is what I have said consistently, every property owner in the city is eligible. That is what I have said, and that is the truth. So whether it is a rental property or it is owner-occupied property, they are eligible under this relief policy. So that's a first clarification. Second clarification is there is no budget for that. It's a policy. And again, it's excess dollars that we shouldn't be collecting because there was a leaky burst pipe, there's a leaky toilet, or there was an unknown underground leak. So we go by the need. So if that happens to be the amount of applications we got in that given time frame. But every year it could be different depending on how many applications we get, how many burst pipes, how many leaky toilets, all of those things. So we are going to make sure we meet the need. So if you are eligible under this policy and you meet that qualification, you are going to get relief. And we're fine with that. So those are the numbers as they stand today. Again, I've said this many times, we encourage council members to let people know about this policy so we can get more people knowledgeable so that they can apply when they fall into one of these three categories. And the last thing I'll say is that, and you've mentioned this many times today, Councilman Kilby, and with all due respect, the mayor also represents the people. He is elected by the people. He also stays close to what the people are talking about. We have said many times that we are dealing with the CSO project, an unaffordable program that we are working to reduce the cost of, and these two guys deserve the credit, and everybody that's working in the service department, because they've done that. They've started to bring the cost down on this unaffordable project. No one disputes that we're dealing with a very difficult time frame as it relates to utility bills. But this administration is never going to create a policy that allows landlords who don't keep up their property to get out of not keeping up their property. And it is important because, and I feel deeply passionate about this, there are, Councilman Kilby, dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens of rental properties where the landlords aren't keeping up the pipes, and they don't care whether or not those excess costs are passed along to those individuals. This policy puts it squarely on the property owners where it should be. We want to make sure that landlords are keeping up their property, and if this council wants to talk about ways in which we can create new programming to get tougher on absentee landlords, to get tougher on slum landlords, we welcome that conversation because there are a lot of people out there that are not keeping up their pipes. And we are not going to ever put anything in place that allows them to get away with that. Now, we believe, as I've said before from this podium, this program is working. We will continue to give council updates every time you would like them as it relates to how many people have applied, how much relief we've been giving out, so that you stay apprised. Again, welcome the opportunity to come talk at your ward meetings. This policy is working. This policy is working, and it's again, we don't see a need, respectfully, to adjust a policy that's working for homeowners and for property owners who are responsible, who come to us and say, I need help, I want to keep my property up, help me to keep my property up. That's what this policy is incentivized to do.
Thank you, Mr. Hardy. Mr. Kilby.
Thank you, Mr. Hardy. I know the policy is helping some people, but, you know, I consider myself pretty much of a grassroots politician. I talk to people at the door, and people tell me things, even landlords. I mean, even though these people are out-of-town landlords in a large extent, I'd say there's always going to be irresponsible people in any business, and there are people that are irresponsible that own property, but I'd say the vast majority of them are responsible landlords, probably 90%. And I don't know, it's kind of hard to have some criteria about are you a responsible landlord or you're not a responsible landlord. They're all going to say they are. But I'm just saying, I think there's people falling through the cracks, and I can show you data, and it's not anything I hired a consultant to come up with, but where people have lost their houses. And I'm talking about people that are in a situation like this. Let me tell you, say somebody's buying a house from one of these landlords that decides, I'm going to sell you the house either on a land contract or an option to buy. All right, something happens, bust pipe or whatever, and he gets a $900 water bill, asks for relief. The landlord may even ask for relief. No relief is offered because that landlord might own a house on the other side of town where maybe he's having a dispute or he's behind. Okay, so your policy leaves a lot to be desired, Mr. Hardy, and it says other provisions. This is the catch-all in your executive summary. It says other provisions. No non-individual account holder, business, etc., shall be eligible for any of the relief in the policy if the property at issue has multiple housing code violations or delinquent City of Akron utility account balances at the time of the request for relief, or if the Director of Public Service determines it would constitute abuse of policy. Now, that to me sounds like you guys are just saying to some landlord, well, you owe us money on this house over on the other side of town, so we're not going to grant you any relief at this particular house that had a leaky toilet or a burst pipe or whatever. And is that the case, Mr. Hardy? Is that the case? Yes or no?
Mr. Hardy.
Madam Chair. So first of all, Councilman Kilby, if you have data, we welcome it. We always like to look at data. If you are asking me whether or not it's true that we don't provide relief to landlords who don't pay their taxes and don't keep their houses up, that's true. Now, if you would like to advocate on their behalf, that's totally your prerogative. Mayor Horgan is going to continue to advocate and keep policies for folks who do pay their taxes and who do keep their house up. So yes, we have provisions that don't allow you to get relief under a city policy if you haven't paid your taxes and you are a known slum landlord. That is an issue. But if you'd like to advocate for them, that's totally your call.
Okay. I'm advocating for those fellows or people. I'm advocating for the people that live in these houses that are losing them, getting kicked out, or whatever. That's who I'm advocating for. So I just want, just sit here and have create straw man arguments. Now, if it was the slum landlord, now it's the irresponsible landlord. Yeah, there's a few. But the vast majority of them are responsible, and I think, let's forget about them for a dispute with the water department with one of his other properties. Now, maybe we could, I want you guys to, your team to think about what we can do to expand this. This is a problem. You can't deny this problem. There is a problem. We know that. So can you go back, keep talking about this as a committee, and as an entertainer, go back and talk to your team and say, what can we do to sweeten this deal up a little bit more? How about the people that live in these houses that are losing them? And I'm not advocating we help out these landlords. That's a bogus argument.
So Mr. Gilby, before I go to Mr. Neal, I sort of kind of hear two arguments going on here, because when I read the legislation, it seems as if the legislation is intended for property owners. And there's already a policy in place to assist landlords. I, as the chair of this committee, will not support anything that's going to cater to a landlord who is behind on their taxes and not paying their bills or paying the water bills, because now they're putting the renters in harm's way, renters and single-family members. So, as I suggested earlier, I think it needs to be probably relooked at and probably written in a different way, because right now, in the way it's written, it seems like it's violating policy or the charter, and I'm not going to support that. Mr. Neal?
Thank you, Madam Chair. What I don't want us to get, what I don't want to get lost in this is just the fact that we do have to find some kind of way to provide relief. I say this is long before this administration was on. We knew when we implemented this policy that half of our constituents could not afford it. So we have to find some kind of way to deal with it. There's just several things. One, I know I requested an update on the LEAF program, the program that was implemented to walk hand in hand with the United Way, to where when people do have a problem with their water bill, they're connected to some kind of financial training support to find out if it's mismanagement or if they actually can't afford it. That would help us kind of get an idea, because if you remember, we write off about 800 to 1.2 every year that we send to the county. Now, we get some of that back, but that's just to keep that in mind. Because the basic thing that we have to understand is the minimum income in our community, the median income, excuse me, is about 34, 35. If we go to some communities, that median income is even less. Now, just to take personalities out of it, Clippinger, if any of you know about Clippinger, it's a money management report that deals with family incomes. I brought something in a while back from 2000, I forget, maybe in 2011, that talked about, you know, if you buy your home, 30% of your income should not, your housing, the mortgage, utilities, everything should not surpass 30% of your income. Well, we know for a lot of our community, if you're at $35,000, I'll take it to $40,000. That means $1,200 for your mortgage or your rent, your insurance, your gas, your electric, and your water. It should not surpass 30%. Using that kind of data to take our emotions out of it will let us know exactly where what our citizens are facing and what we have to come up with. Because, you know, I looked at a water bill. I think maybe 85% of that is connected, or maybe 90% of it is connected to the CSO project. You know, you could get a $7, $14 water bill, and all the rest of it, well, let me back up, because you do have to take out your garbage, because we have our garbage in that bill too. But about 80% of it is connected to the CSO project. So how much of that can we really alter? You know, we had talked about maybe giving every citizen some kind of credit, because outside of my esteemed colleague, Mr. Kilby, nobody turns on the shower and just jumps into the shower. They let that water run a little bit. Just like when we flush our sewer system. So, you know, I don't have the answer, but I do know that we have to be, look at this from every angle. And I just want to share this with council and the administration. I'm sure the administration may know about this, but I want to let you know what some communities are faced with. There is a thing that's becoming more and more of a conversation, and Mark Zuckerberg spoke about something about universal compensation. A lot of communities are looking at basic income in their communities because their constituents cannot make ends meet. So what they're doing is they're taking their CDBG funds and supplementing a certain part of their, it's not a welfare check, but it automatically, because it comes right back into the, maybe we may have to look at supplementing a certain part of our constituents as far as their water bill. The reason why I mention this is that communities understand the old way of doing business does not sustain the present state because they're just as challenged as we are. So I appreciate the discussion. I hope we don't feel just because we vote down a piece of legislation that, oh man, we don't have to deal with it anymore. That's not the case. We've got to find a way to find some relief for our constituents who are struggling to make ends meet. No matter which way you cut it, 34 to 35 is a median for all of Akron. You go into certain wards, that median income may drop down to 24, 20. But yet the water bill does not discriminate. If you got 4 people in your home, you know, unless you're doing like they used to do in the old days where you take a bath on Sundays, you know, it's just not working for you. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Councilman Fusco.
Thank you, Chair Samples. The, excuse me, we do have the one program, and I agree in terms of Representative Neal here and Mr. Kilby in terms of trying to find ways to work and to at this point it's almost like delay an increase or even look at, you know, ways we can, you know, in terms of the utility bill itself. And that takes being familiar with what these guys do on a day-to-day basis practically in terms of working with the Ohio, the national, federal EPAs, and trying to work through all that and reducing costs where it sits, and that's it's in the sewers, it's in the pipes. This is a big chunk of what we're dealing with here, and to continue to try to find ways, I'm all about that and support that issue. But in terms of this piece here, Mr. Kilby, with all respect, this is basically putting the utility bill portion of it, and even the water bill portion. Again, this is this does not fit within our charter, and it violates the state law in terms of, you know, us versus the service director, you know, setting rates and so on and so forth. We just have to be continue to work within the confines of law, and that's my position, anyways, and continue to try to find ways. So,
Mr. Kilby.
Can I say that, Foreman? Okay, so we know that this policy cost the city about a little less than $600,000 for a full year 2017. That was just mostly for homeowners. Some landlords maybe got a little bit, I think very few, but the fact remains these renters and people buying houses and land contracts, many of those were in the lurch, and many of those people lost their houses. We want to encourage home ownership. I think we all would agree with that. And we want to encourage landlords to fix up their houses. But we offer very little money to help them, and they're spending their own money doing this. And if we want to tighten up the housing code, let me rephrase that. If we want to enforce the housing code we already have, we need a few more housing inspectors. The one that was doing Ward 2 was doing, I think, Ward 10, and now she's doing another ward. So she's doing 3 wards now. And it was 2 early on in this administration. So that's how you enforce the housing code on so-called slum landlords. And as far as the water, this is water that we say we're writing it off. Basically, we are writing it off. It's water that, sewer bills, mostly sewer bills that wouldn't, probably half of it may not have ever been collected anyways. So I'm just saying, I just think there's room to compromise. And if the administration wants to think a little deeper rather than just dig in and say, no, we're not going to do anything to help out slum landlords and leave it at that, then the people are probably going to do something like take it to the streets and try to get a charter amendment to accomplish something similar to this. And, you know, this piece of legislation that I brought in back in December, you know, if you guys really want to do something, do it with a policy. If I'm sincere, you guys can take credit for it. I don't care if my legislation gets passed. I'd like to see it be an ordinance, but it doesn't have to be. But I think this administration needs to realize there's people out there that are really falling through the cracks. I was out walking, talking to some people in my ward yesterday. Fella, he's disabled, he's in a wheelchair. He says he gets $800 a month from SSI or SSD. I didn't ask him which one, but okay, $800 a month, he's trying to hold on to a house. I guess the house is paid for, his mother probably left it to him. But if his water bill, let's say it's 100, they were averaging, that's 10%. I mean, that's probably at least 12 or 13% of his income, just for, and that's year-round. It's not like the gas bill goes up a little bit in the winter, in the summertime it drops down to next to nothing. This is year-round. So I just think this has gotten totally out of hand, these sewer bills, and besides this particular issue, which is limited just to these leaks, should be expanded a little farther, and then we also need to start thinking long-term about how we're going to raise the money for this CSO program other than just raise people's sewer bills. Long-term, the economists should be looking at what are other cities doing. Like, you can go on the internet, other cities are doing assessments, whatever. There's got to be a way, because people are moving out of this city left and right because of the sewer bills, and not just the poor people, it's middle-class people. These are the last people we want to lose. So I just think of the future, not just getting through an election. We need to be thinking long-term what we can do to pay for this CSO program without gouging the ratepayers, which, you know, they can pay no more.
All right, thank you, Mr. Kilby. Any other questions or comments from committee members? Council, Mr. Swirsky?
I think everybody knows that the rates are kind of high, and people would like to have their sewer bills lowered, but I think, as Mr. Kilby, you yourself said, this piece of legislation, you could drive a truck through the loopholes, and that it isn't good legislation. So I'd like to go with that sentiment and recommend an adverse report.
Can I say one last thing? I said that this piece of legislation...
Excuse me, you have a motion on the floor, Mr. Kilby.
Yeah.
I would like to take time on it, to tell you the truth.
Well, you already got a motion on the floor before you took time, so let's deal with the motion.
I have a motion and a second from Mr. Hoke. All in favor of the motion on the adverse report, signify by saying aye. Aye. Those against? Against. Okay, we have four against.
You want a roll call?
Yes, please. I can't count today.
Samples?
Sorry.
Sample?
No.
Wait a minute,
But I'm for the adverse report, yes.
Yes. Okay. Kilby?
No.
Swirsky?
Yes.
Hoke? Freeman? Okay, it's an adverse report, passes 4-1.
Can I say something?
Mr.
Anything else
Kilby.
come before this
You
committee?
still have 2 more pieces of legislation.
Well, this is on this
Two more.
piece of legislation. I'd like to talk about it now. I think this council just passed up an opportunity to do something for the people. We had a dialogue going, and that's the way things get worked out in a give and take political institution like this. City government should be. And we just threw that out the window. Now nothing's going to get done for these people. And sure, the legislation, you know, they pointed out the flaws of it, but it could have been tweaked, it could have been changed, we could have done something, and we just didn't. That's unfortunate, in my opinion. Nothing personal with anybody.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Kilby. On to new legislation. We have 2 pieces in front of us. The first one is an ordinance authorizing the mayor or his designee, after publicly advertising for bids, to enter into a contract for the purchase of 10 high-mast LED light fixtures for the water reclamation facility and declaring an emergency. Mr. Leto?
Thank you, Madam Chairman, members of the committee. This is just the continuation of upgrading our lights down at the wastewater plant to LED to save money in the sewer division. So what we're going to do with our own staff is we are going to replace 20 high-pressure sodium lights, high mass, with 10 LED. These lamps are 44% less efficient, or they're more efficient than what's currently there. Plus, we're going to cut our load in half and with the same amount of looms. So with that, I would ask passage.
Okay. Any questions from committee members? Mr. Swirsky?
No question, just a comment. I'm just very pleased that you're going with the LED light fixtures. Appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Okay, any questions from council members? Okay, can I get a motion for suspension of the rules?
Motion for suspension of the rules.
Can I get a second? All in favor? Aye. Those against? Okay, ayes have it. Number 2, ordinance authorizing the purchasing agent or her designee after publicly advertising for bids to enter into a contract for the demolition and removal of an existing duplex house at the Akron Water Plant at 1570 Ravenna Road in Kent, Ohio, and declaring an emergency. Mr. Leto?
Thank you, Madam Chairman, members of the committee. When the water plant was constructed in 1917, there was 2 brick single-family homes and 2 duplexes, okay? About 30 years ago, we demoed one of those duplexes to put in a new substation, and then shortly after that, we demoed one of the single-family homes. Well, after 9/11 and doing a security audit, it became apparent that because people used to work up there lived in these homes, okay, and no one's lived in these homes for years, they've been vacant. So it was apparent that they needed to be demoed. We demoed one a few years ago, and this is to give us the legislation so we can bid out the demo for this duplex that's on our property.
Okay. Quick question. This home, because it's so old, does it have asbestos in it, and how close is it to the water?
It's way away from our watershed, okay, but yes, there are some abatement that will have to happen, yes.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from committee members? What's your pleasure? Oh, Mr. Kilby?
I just wonder, does anybody know, asbestos dust is hazardous, but, you know, drinking it in water, would that be hazardous too? I don't know. I mean, it's like...
It's nowhere near our water system, though.
Yeah, I know. But if, I'm just playing the devil's advocate, would it be something to be concerned about if it was in the water? Just small amounts, minute amounts?
I can't really comment on that. We have a certified company that comes in and abates the asbestos.
Okay.
Okay, what's your pleasure, Mr. Leto?
Consent's fine.
Okay, can I get a motion for consent?
Motion for consent.
Can I get a second? All in favor? Opposed? Ayes have it. If we have nothing else coming before us, we are adjourned.
That's it.
Yeah.